Well, hello, everybody. Super excited to be joining everybody this morning. My name is Diane Gutiw. I lead CGI's global AI research area. And I'm really excited to be joined with my colleague, Rorisang. Maybe you can introduce yourself, Rorisang.
Yes, sure. Thanks, Diane. I am Rorisang Baloyi, and I'm leading innovation for the Canada West. Excited to be here today. Yeah, go ahead, Diane.
Yeah. So, we thought that we would have a conversation and, looking at some of the topics that we hear when we're speaking to folks that are either newly entering our sector or transitioning into more of an AI role. AI innovation transformation is part of what Rorisang and I have been doing for a number of years. So we hope that we come up with some interesting insights. Please do drop some questions in. There was lots of time if you have questions. But we thought we would start off just giving a little bit of a snapshot of how we ended up where we are, just to give that context. So Rorisang, maybe you can tell folks, how did you get to where you are and what is it that you do now?
Yeah, Diane. I'll try and summarize how I got here because it is a lengthy it's a lengthy journey. So my background is in the IT space. It's something that I need to highlight that you don't need to be in the IT space for you to speak AI. But my journey started in the IT space. I did my bachelor's degree in IT management, did my MBA to understand the business aspect of things, and I now do my doctorate in innovation. I've always tried to balance my academic aspect with experience. So in the past, I've been in the financial service space where I had digital transformation. I've been an IT executive, and right now I am leading innovation. Parallel to that, I'm doing other things as well. But I think these are the things of interest in how I ended up in this space. When I was leading the IT space, my interest has always been in what is emerging, what is new, which is something that I think AI is bringing about. AI is not new, but it always has new evolution. So I've always tried to empower myself towards what is new and interesting in the AI space as well as in the innovation space. So at a high level, that's how I got here, and I'm still interested in it. So, Diane, I think you also have an interesting journey here.
Yeah, I think your point on what are you interested in is absolutely key to where you end up in your career. And your interest changes over time, which is why we
Mhm.
both have journeys that haven't been a straight line to where we've ended up. So for myself, when I first went into university, I went into more of an engineering, computer engineering, which is an interesting story in its own. It wasn't because at that point it was a great interest, but it was because they had fabulous jackets at the University of Victoria. And if you were a girl and you got a jacket, it came with a pin that said, "This is not my boyfriend's jacket." And that's what lured me in the beginning. I thought that was an interesting take. So I came up through information technology as well, but right from the beginning, my focus has been on healthcare,
Mhm.
and ended up doing data science and public health epidemiology early on in my career. Also did an MBA, and what's interesting about that, and I see a question about certifications and courses. At that point, when you did your MBA, you could do a general MBA, which gives you
Yep.
a really good holistic view to business, but there's specializations. And the reason I did the MBA is it was a specialized program at Royal Roads at the time that you could do an MBA as well as do the equivalent of your Master's of Computer Science or Computer Engineering. And my focus had been on decision support, which is an early name for what we were doing in AI before AI was a thing. I did do my doctorate. I had an opportunity, which was really great, to do a doctorate in medical AI. We were doing some interesting work across North America in collecting data for making evidence-based decisions in medicine. And that's where I went with that. And, I focused on that through COVID, and coming out of COVID when generative AI began to pick up and neural networks, which we've been working on for years, became more accessible, and which is why we really are at this AI's iPhone moment, we call it. Um, I was asked to take this role in AI research because I have been working in data science for multiple decades, and I'm familiar both with the newer technology and the base technology that underlays it. So it has been a winding path, and I think we'll talk a little bit more about that. But Rorisang, I think your story is particularly interesting because you didn't just follow a career path and certifications, and we can talk about that when in our Q&A later, but you
Yeah.
also changed jurisdictions and changed your roles geographically. Maybe you can tell folks about what that was like.
I did. It was very interesting because one thing I need to mention within the IT space or AI itself, there are considerations you need to put forward. So if I'm working in South Africa, for an example, or if I'm working in Canada, I need to adhere by uh, how those countries allow AI, work with AI. And that has been interesting to me because my background, I've worked in 8 other countries, and that was very similar there as well. That I needed to adhere and understand what is acceptable and what is not acceptable in those jurisdictions, and that's a learning. It's on the macro level, but it's something that you just need to empower yourself and be able to understand why it's important. Also on the learning side, understanding what uh, the government in that space is is encouraging people to learn, because that would be interesting for the space that you're in. It's something that I also think as people are taking on these courses, you need to understand where are you filling the gap. It doesn't make sense for you to study something that won't fill the gap or bring in a solution for the space that you're in. So I found that interesting for myself, and it's something that I think Diane as well. You've been working in multiple countries, and you probably have a lot to share in that space.
Yeah, I've had just a fabulous opportunity. I've been really lucky in moving to this global role at a time when AI really has stepped to the forefront of what organizations are doing to seize opportunities, to reduce risk, and to find different ways of working. So the first thing that we focused on was the responsible use of AI, and we've had an opportunity to work with the EU AI Commission as well as different governments globally in the UK, the US, Canada, to be able to not only understand what these jurisdictional differences are, but to be
Mm,
able to advise on that because it is rapidly expanding. I think it takes us to an interesting place, for if I was someone that's attending this, I'd be really interested in what are the opportunities? Where's the
mm,
opportunity and how do I, with my background, fit into the AI world? And the most interesting thing that I'm finding really amazing is that it's opening up a world for more diverse teams. And
mm,
the reason for that is because these solutions at this point with generative AI, foundation models, large language and small language models, all of these tools that we're using as we build out AI solutions and agentic AI solutions and whatever the next thing is, we're pulling from different areas because it's low code. It's not something that you need to know how to write the algorithm or develop a neural
mm,
network, and no code in some cases. So on the technical side, it's very much configuration, data engineering, understanding infrastructure, cyber, which I think there was a session earlier today, if anyone joined in that. All of those are the technical periphery to it. But we're also pulling in business experts because to get reliable outputs, you need to have people that understand the context, understand the problem you're trying to solve, understand the data we're using to fine tune or train these models, depending on the type of model you're going with. We're always starting with what's the problem you're trying to solve. We don't develop
mm,
AI just because. No one has ever called me up and said, "Hey, I want you to build this cool AI thing." They call up and say, "Hey, we've got a really big problem, and is this a tool that's going to help solve it?" And one of the big problems right now is resource capacity. 25 to 40% of our population will be retiring in the next 10 years. So this is a great opportunity to be able to leverage these tools to assist. And in doing that, we need people from business, from finance, from clinical, from operations and manufacturing to be able to work as part of this ecosystem as we rethink how we work.
mm.
So we're saying in what you've been looking at in your digital transformation lens, where do you see opportunities for upskilling and retraining, as well as for new folks entering the area?
Yeah, so then I think a lot of people will be asking themselves, how do they transition from traditional studies into, I mean, traditional doing degrees and doctorates, those big courses. I think we need to also look at these short courses that people could focus on. So whether you want to be a human AI invoker, which was previously known as UX designers, or whether you want to be a prompt engineer, is just looking at these short courses that you can quickly jump on and learn and be able to implement and execute. I think that's what AI is bringing here. Not that there are no long-term degrees that you can do, but I think now AI is giving us an opportunity to jump on these short courses and be able to quickly implement. Um, yeah, so I'm not sure what's your view on your side there, and that's what I'm thinking.
Yeah,
Even though
well, anyone
yeah,
that tells you they're an expert in generative AI with multiple years, there is no expert at this point. There's people that have become more familiar with different models and the underworkings of the model, but the opportunities are still there to get in very early. These are low code, no code models. So you don't have to be a computer scientist or a data
yeah,
scientist to understand how they work, to configure, to develop your own agents is something, again, which is very low code, no code. So to your point, there's some really fantastic courses. We're all going to inevitably need to learn how to work with these tools to be able to do more. To be able to be more efficient, to be able to find things quicker, to look things up quicker, to help us frame and communicate easier. It's not replacing us. AI and AI tools will replace tasks. There's no question that there are manually intensive tasks that will be replaced naturally through AI. No different than the spell check feature in Word.
yeah,
But with these tools, you still need somebody to drive the question. You need somebody that is using the tool to be able to answer or find things. And that's where I would say anybody entering the workforce should be understanding and familiar with how to use these tools. So there's lots of amazing courses on prompt engineering, and being able to create your own GPTs, if that's your tool of choice, or different agents to help serve what it is you do. And there's free courses if you look on the internet, from everything from Harvard to MIT to more local courses if you wanted to attend a person-led course. If you want to work specifically in configuring and developing AI for different clients, then there's another level deeper on how do these tools work and how do you configure them for agentic solutions? How do you monitor and have oversight? How do we fine tune these on different data? So there's a number of different career paths that enter into it, and it's still very new. The world is evolving. So, depending on where you're coming in from, the types of courses you can take are out there, they're accessible, as well as the tools are accessible. Just be cautious, be a discerning human when you're using the tools. Know that the public models, you always risk that your information may be reused. So treat these tools the way you would with social media and what you put in. But it's a fantastic tool for doing research, for exploring different topics, and getting more familiar in how you would use these. Getting more familiar with prompt engineering is going to serve anybody as they're coming into the workforce or as they're adopting these tools in their day-to-day use. So Rorisang, I'm going to lean on your expertise here and ask you the question: how do you see this framing the future of work? How will we be working differently in the future?
Yeah, I think in the future, Diane, we need to see, first of all, you need to have an interest, because I think a lot of people, because of the pressure of AI, people feel like they just need to learn anything in AI and move with the world. But I think it's important that we still find what is of interest to us, and then see how we can learn whatever it is of interest to us to align with the future. So I see us adopting new, refining existing learning. So if you were, like, for example, you did your research in your doctorate, research is still required in the future, seeing how you can fit that into the future, right? and also looking at what is emerging in line with what is of interest to you. So if you want to be a prompt engineer going forward, is it something that is of interest? Because we don't want miserable people in the future that will have studied things that are not of interest, but everyone is just adopting AI because it's a hot topic. And one other thing that I also see then is um, as you mentioned, AI is not here to replace people. However, we also need to be part of the journey, right? Because I think if AI is not of interest to you and you're sitting down and you're not adopting anything AI related, you may miss out on the journey or where we're embarking in. You still need to learn, but align it with what is of interest to you. I don't know what's your view here, Dan.
Yeah, I always come back to what is it we're doing with this tool? It is just a
Mm,
tool, to your point. It's
exactly.
not going to fundamentally replace humans. However, it will shift what we do, how we work, and where we're
Mm,
working, and leveraging the tools to do the things that are less interesting so we can do the more interesting things. But some of the fabulous uses of AI that we've seen is, in the healthcare space, AI is an amazing tool for seeing things that are very hard to see with the human eye.
mm.
So diagnostic imaging, we're seeing, opportunities to reduce the screening ages for cancers. We're detecting to 99% accuracy early brain bleeds, which are fatal. In predictive maintenance, we're extending the useful lifespan of assets in organizations. And this is where, when we're looking at how do you do this as a career, you know, how you can leverage these tools to be able to solve those hard problems, whether it's in social care and safeguarding children and addressing the opioid crisis, or whether it's in manufacturing and getting into robotics. The opportunities are really vast.
Yeah.
So I think there's some interesting things. The one question that you and I were having, though, that we were talking about earlier, and I don't want to miss it, is we hear a lot about diversity, and then we hear a lot about bias and
Nice.
bias models. And I wanted to address that one. There's bias in AI means a number of different things. For anybody who's coming out of research and math, as my son would call it, the mathiness of what I do, bias and variance are accuracy in the math. When we're talking about bias in the data, it's focused on the output of the models and making sure the output of the model has taken the full picture into consideration. But when we're talking about bias, the addressing of bias needs to be on the question we're trying to answer rather than the data that
Mm,
is included in the model. And the reason I say that is the models need to be able to answer a question for a specific context or a specific population. And you need to make sure the model has been trained to accurately answer that question. So we were talking earlier, you wouldn't train a model on a population in Montreal, which is quite a young population, and then apply that to Victoria, BC, which is a
mm,
much older population, because you wouldn't get an accurate answer for that population. But the bias needs to be taken into consideration when you're asking the question or solving the problem. Is this something that is a global thing, in which point we need to make sure we have global data? Is this a very focused question?
mm.
So it's an interesting area. But for me, on the future of work, where we're really going to see less bias is on the people that are developing the tools, the people that are monitoring the tools, the people that are working with the tools, is a full, very diverse workforce that will have their own views in developing these solutions and using them for societal benefit, for work and operations. So I think
Yeah.
that's really interesting, and it's an ongoing conversation. I think there's a whole philosophy evolving around AI, hybrid workplaces with AI and human interaction, and it's a really interesting point to be entering this career area.
Yeah, and I think Diane, because today is the Women in Tech event, I think a lot of people would be worried about biases around their careers as women within the AI space, and I think this gives an opportunity for us to be contributors in building these models and not just be consumers, because I think when we are contributing towards the build, it's an opportunity for us to ensure that some of the biases that may have been in data that was captured in the 1950s don't come forward in today's world.
Yeah, you know, and when that was the conversation we're having, if I'm looking at workplace data going back before the 1950s, there simply weren't a lot of women in the workplace. So addressing that would be interesting. All right, so let's look at some of the questions we have in here. And the first one I'm going to hit is on, is this being driven by IT or business? And I think this goes back to what we were just saying about diverse teams. Traditionally, data analytics, AI were technology services, and it really has shifted. The whole focus on analytics and AI has been to address getting information closer to business decision makers or closer to citizens making decisions. And that shift, the accessibility, the natural language front end of these, being able to have a conversation with your data, is a natural shift away from IT. IT is still critical to having a safe infrastructure, to selecting safe models, to securing information and data. But the outputs of the model, as well as the inputs to what's the question we're trying to address, really is coming from the business. So it's much more collaborative. And anyone that's reached out to us, it's a combination. But usually I would say it's a more business focus when we get asked, because as I say, no one's coming to say, build me a cool AI thing. They're coming to say, I have a problem, and now do we have a new tool that's going to make this easier to solve?
Yeah, I would go for the next one. It says, how do we validate AI tools? I think similar to how you would before AI was introduced, so using valid or reliable research platforms would still be the way that you need to validate AI. We do know, and this is a good question because we do know that AI tools are not always 100% accurate. So you need to ensure that even when you're engaging with the client or you're engaging in your private life, you need to make sure that the information that you're sharing is still valid. So I think the existing reliable source platforms are still valuable here. Diane, I'm not sure if you have any views here.
Yeah, so there's actually, well, I agree with you. When we're looking at the outputs of AI and reliability, we need to look at it at each stage. We need to make sure that the model is the correct model, so
Mm-hmm.
that not everything is an AI problem, when you start with a problem, but you need to make sure you're using the right model to give you the right answer. You need to make sure it's fine-tuned on data and trained on data that's going to give you an accurate answer. And then you need to build in quality assurance related to these to understand what is the quality you're getting. And then mostly, you need to be discerning. You wouldn't Google what's the best Italian restaurant in Victoria and take the top one in your Google list. You're going to refine, go down the list, ask qualifying questions. What's the best Italian restaurant? Which is a good one I can take my dog to, and if I have children, which is the best one? I'm gluten-free, which is the best one? And you need to refine the same way you would a Google search. I'm going to take another question because I know we're going to run out of time, and I'm going to take two. One is on AI research and how to join that industry. And the second one is on ESG and environmental impacts. And there's two angles to this. There's research with these tools, and there's research about these tools. When we look at using the tools to be able to detect patterns to solve a problem, extreme environmental impacts is a problem that you can use AI to detect patterns and provide a next best action. And that's a lot of what we're seeing with AI, is using the tool to see things that would be very expensive, very complex. We could do it with our human intelligence without AI, but AI does it faster, and it's very good at detecting patterns. So regardless of the type, in ESG, in social care, the type of things and the research you can do with AI is really interesting. And I'm seeing more and more in academics, because I did and do sometimes still teach at university. And, we're, rather than being afraid of the tools, a lot of academic institutions are looking at, how do I embrace this tool? And research is a great use, but be discerning, ask for the link, follow up on the references. Don't take it at face value, because it's connecting the dots and seeing patterns and information, and it may not always be right. And ask it to clarify. The second one on the ESG, I had anyone on this call interested in environmental impacts, social or governance impacts, look at our responsible use of AI ESG report on CGI.com. There's lots that we're doing with AI, as well as how we build out our AI to be able to address all of these things. And it's a really interesting, comprehensive report. It's posted on CGI.com. It'd be our responsible use of AI ESG report.
Yeah, I'll take the last one, Diane, because we have a few minutes, but
I don't know if Rorisang froze or if I did. All right. Well, I'm going to assume that Rorisang froze, and I'll continue to move forward on one of the other questions, which is on ML ops. And when we use AI at CGI, one of the things that we're doing is we're focusing on the end-to-end use of AI from inception of a problem through to operations. And the reason we do that is it's critical to make sure that the information is remaining correct, that the use of the tool is receiving the benefit. So let's say we're developing an AI solution for a contact center. Is this solution still relevant? Is it answering the correct questions? So our ML ops involves moving things into production in a way that's relevant, that we're monitoring, we're keeping oversight on, and when the time comes, retiring the solution, if that makes sense. So ML ops is a key part of our AI journey, and it's absolutely critical to responsible use of AI to be able to continue to use it in that way. I'm looking at a couple of other questions here. If we want to use this, one of the things I see is how do we help guide towards AI transformation? And I'll combine that with the question on certifications. There are specific courses that are now pulling AI into digital transformation, business analysis. If you take a look at some of the courses that are either available online, that are available for free, again, through some of the large universities, those are great programs, but also look at what the different universities are now putting out in their technology, in their AI, in their informatics programs, because there is a much deeper AI lens. And Rorisang, you're back. We lost you for a second. What do you think on that one, on AI transformation and certifications?
Yeah, I'll match it with the last question, Diane, which speaks about how do we ensure that clients that have legacy systems, how do they make that decision to move forward? So similar to what you would study, it will be something of value to what is currently required. So you would take on AI courses. There's long-term AI courses where you can do those and match them with your bachelor degrees, etc. But the client side, I think you need to align it with business, what is required by business, not necessarily just adopting AI technologies, but understanding what is the business journey and where do they want to be, and align AI in that transformation. I always find it to be tricky when on the technology side, you're just bringing in AI technology. Not that it's the wrong thing, but I think it's important that it's aligned with business strategy and where the business is going.
So I'm going to take just one last one, and it's a bit of advice. It's also bridging academia and industry. You know, if you are coming into this field, you're coming into the organization, come in with the skills you have now and build on your skills, because the technology is evolving very quickly. The guidance and use across all industries, whether it's in IT consulting, whether you're in public sector or private sector, retail, manufacturing, this is a skill that is emerging. So be interested and invest in yourself. If you're finding that you're really enjoying building GPTs, or you want to learn more about agentic use and autonomous automation in manufacturing, start to invest in yourself within the scope of what your own role is and look for opportunities. My best advice is do not be afraid, to be willing to be uncomfortable, to know that this is new, and then be able to invest in yourself and find, back to the very beginning point, what interests you and build that into what you're doing now. Because all careers are going to be impacted by AI, whether it's productivity tools, whether it's developing solutions or configuring them for clients. You're going to be impacted and have opportunities. So take the time to look at what you find fits best into your learning journey and your career desires and vision, and invest in yourself as you move along. Don't expect you're going to take a course and come out an AI expert, because the technology just is evolving so quickly. What do you think on about that? What advice would you give to people entering this now, Rorisang?
Yeah, it's being comfortable with the unknown and closing the gap. In summary, I'd put it like that because AI is evolving. Whoever learned AI 20 years ago and how it has evolved right now, there's a huge gap. So being comfortable that you don't know and being ready to learn what's new in the industry. That's my advice to everyone that wants to tap into the industry.
Yeah, absolutely. And look at how it can help you in your day-to-day tasks. There's so many great opportunities again to invest in yourself and take these courses. So I think we have. I love these a couple last questions that Rorisang and I like to banter back and forth on. So Rorisang, to looking at your career so far, you're early on in your career, and there's so much opportunities. What advice would you give to your younger self if you could give advice now back to where you were when you started?
Yeah, I think, Diane, as, as I always mention to you, I think I rushed my career because I wanted to go up the corporate ladder, which I did. I think right now I'm enjoying the journey and I'm doing things that are of interest. I probably have said this a million times for people to really focus on things that they enjoy and things that are of interest to them because you tend to enjoy the journey, unlike how I did my career before, where I was just rushing to get to be an IT executive and get the title. But I think the journey is more enjoyable than the title. And you, Dave?
With me, get comfortable being uncomfortable would be the advice. Don't hesitate and always take an opportunity when it's given to you, because you're given so many paths and choices in your career. If there's one that looks intriguing, but you think, oh, I don't know that, or that's a long way away, don't be afraid to take it and lean on others to be able to build yourself up. And it goes along with enjoying the journey, but be comfortable, enjoy, get excited by being uncomfortable. And this is a space where I think a lot of people are right now with these AI tools coming out. Is you're a little uncomfortable, we're not really sure how they work, invest in that, go explore, see how it can help you, and don't be afraid to put your hand up and say, hey, I'd like to do that, I'd like to be part of this group exploring this new area or this new career path. So I think that would be really critical as well, going forward.
And then just one last one. If you were to write a book about yourself, what would be the title of that book?
I know I've already used the line of "this is not my boyfriend's jacket," so I think that's a good one. Um,
Yeah.
I can remember when I was starting to do my PhD, and I did my PhD in medical AI, and my mother was pushing me for, go to medical school. Don't do this AI thing. You'll never have work. No, you're never going to use that. And I think back, it was what interested me at the time. I saw huge opportunities and I jumped in, but it wasn't a major field. It was if you were looking at data for solving diagnostics or different problems or decision support, but it wasn't where it is now. It was definitely a niche. And I think back and think, well, gee, there was a choice I made that I had no idea. I think it surprised us all how big this got coming out of COVID and in the digital transformation. So really interesting. So I don't know, is there any last questions from the group? The question on bridging the gap between academia and industry. I think in order to be able to advance this field, it's not just going to be industry, and it's not just going to be the big vendors, the Googles, the Microsofts, the AWS, the Salesforce, I could go on and on, that are investing. It needs to be a three-way collaboration between academia, industry, which means business and people that are delivering the services, and the big hyperscaler organizations that are developing the software. We're seeing that in the work that we've been doing with the EU AI Commission, was very much a collaboration between the three. And that's in how do we future-proof policies, guidelines, and guardrails to make sure we're leveraging these innovations for societal good. I think that one that is really interesting. So, I think academia is absolutely critical to this. And if you're working in an area of academia, or if that's a career path for you as well, you're not going to be left out of this ongoing technology evolution.
Yeah, I looked at it slightly different, Diane. Not different, but in addition to what you're saying, is that also academia needs to be on the same journey as we are on, or similar journey. Probably it would be starting from a client advising, I think, consulting companies what they want, and feeding back to academic institutions to say this is what is needed in the market, so that there's no huge gap between what comes out of academia into the industry. Because if there's a huge gap there, I foresee problems where people would come out with no emerging skills into the industry. That would be very risky for industry.
Yeah, there's a really interesting question on what possible ways are there to get hands-on experience with AI other than taking certifications. And this is what has made this such a big moment for AI, is the accessibility. These tools are accessible publicly. Just be very cognizant of what you're putting into the public models. Don't put anything in there that you wouldn't put on any other public forum. However, if you're using the tool to explore the capabilities and how they work and how you can develop different things in GPTs, you can do that very safely using these public tools to be able to explore more. Again, I cannot say enough. Be aware that if you put your name, your phone number, any of your customer or business information in there, it is not safe. So you really need to focus on exploring it for your own learning. But you can do that to say, how would I create a small agent that is able to advise on my exercise and fitness program? Or I want to run a marathon by October, it's June. Give me a schedule that's going to do that and keep me to task every day, and build an agent that's helping you with something that's interesting in other parts of your life. You can then use that as a reference to not only, I'm a business analyst, I understand how this works. And by the way, I created my own agent, do you want to see it? Because these tools are so incredibly accessible. They're public tools, free to use. There's lots of on-premise tools and tools that are safe. Just make sure you're aware of what the tool is, where that information goes, and keep your own information safe and use it for your learning in a way that's protecting your information. I know that Rorisang, you've been playing with a lot of these tools. Any ideas as well on the types of things you can do with the models to get more familiar?
Yeah, I use different models for different tasks. So if I'm considering that it also needs to be very safe. So if I'm doing my work, I would use things like GPT. If I'm using it for my robots, which is some of the things that I'm trying out as part of innovation, I would use a different model. So I would advise that if you find a model that is of interest to you, you don't need to stick to that one model, but you can see what works best for different tasks that you're doing. So if I'm doing research, I would go for more academic AI models. So that would be my recommendation as an AI user.
Yeah, absolutely. And if there was one course I advise people to take as they're getting familiar, it would be on prompt engineering, how you ask the questions. And I thought it would be relatively straightforward. You can ask a question and get an answer, but there's ways you can frame your questions to get more precise answers. There's also ways that you can get the AI tool to validate the accuracy of the answer, to provide you links to the sources, to check the links to the sources and do some comparison between them. So that would also be a place that I would suggest, is understand the different capabilities of the different tools and use it to be able to help frame. There's just so many tools that are available. if you're interested in what's coming next, it's very much agentic AI, which is multiple agents working together to do more complex things. These agents are trained. They may be traditional AI, they may be generative AI, and they're trained on a specific function that's triggered or orchestrated. So, that's where I would go next. So I think we're at end of time. I hope that was interesting for people. Please, stay engaged and invest in yourself. And thank you very much for joining us today. It was a fun conversation. Thanks, Rorisang, as always.
Thanks, Ben. Thanks, everyone. Bye.